Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Girk. I'm a PR director here at Helen Woodward Animal Center, and I'm excited to invite everybody and welcome everybody to the third panel discussion on the second day of Helen Woodward Animal Center's 9th annual PAWmicon event. This is certainly a panel discussion that we have all been looking forward to. And I'm very, very excited for everybody to hear these wonderful panelists, but I get the great honor of introducing our moderator for today. He's creative director, writer, and artist of Bongo Comics, best known for his work with The Simpsons as well as Futurama. When Matt Groening founded Bongo Comics, Bill Morrison, our moderator here, drew the very first Simpsons comic, which I think is a really cool thing. He recently worked as a character designer and artist for Groening's Netflix series Disenchantment, and most recently, he created a graphic novel adaptation of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine for Titan Comics, and was executive editor of Mad Magazine. Thank you so much for being here, Bill Morrison.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. And welcome, everyone. I'm not sure how many people are here, but we're glad you're here. We're going to have a lively discussion this next hour. Let's get right into it. I'd like to introduce our panelists in sort of semi-alphabetical order. First, I'd like to welcome Greg Evans. Greg is the creator of the beloved comic strip Luann, which you all know. It began in 1985, and since then, it's been a must-read for millions and millions of readers every day. Greg is also the co-creator of Karen Evans, who is also here with us. Karen is not only the inspiration for Luann, but she is also now Greg's co-writer on the strip. Hi, Karen.
Hey, Bill.
Next, we have Patrick McDonald. Patrick is the creator of the animal-friendly comic strip Mutts, which is also much beloved, and which, in addition to appearing in several hundred newspapers in 22 countries, has also appeared on more refrigerators than any strip since The Far Side. And it's probably on your refrigerator door right now. Wayno is our next contestant, our next panelist. Wayno is a Pittsburgh-based cartoonist. He's also an illustrator, pop artist, writer, and musician, sort of a Renaissance cartoonist. And he's currently the daily cartoonist for Bizarro, which is syndicated internationally in more than 350 newspapers. Interesting fact, Wayno's name is a registered trademark, which means it always has that little R in a circle after it. And that leads some people to mistakenly call him Waynor.
Yeah.
But I want to assure you his name is simply Wayno. So welcome to all our panelists. Let's have a virtual round of applause. And we will get right into the questions. I want to start off with the most burning question of all time, I think, related to comics and animals, and that is, how can Mickey Mouse be friends with Goofy, who's a talking dog, and also have a dog for a pet? Anybody want to field that one?
Because Walt said so.
Yeah, because Walt said so. That's a good answer.
Because Walt said so. The creator said so.
Called imagination.
I think that question was originally posed in the film Stand By Me, and I don't believe it's ever been really answered, at least to my satisfaction. It's something that every time I see a Mickey Mouse cartoon where Goofy and Pluto appear, it always just kind of drives me crazy.
Sorry.
Okay, let's move on to a real question, and this is for everybody. First of all, whenever I do a panel, I sort of like to have it be sort of a free-for-all. It's not really me interviewing all of you. It's more of like a free-form discussion. So I'm going to throw some questions out. These questions are for everyone, but if you have a question as a panelist that sort of comes to mind, feel free to ask it or ask one of the other panelists. So this should just be like us sitting around as if we're at the Reuben Awards and we're just sort of talking. By the way, for the audience, all 5 of us are members of the National Cartoonist Society. This year, we didn't get to attend the Reuben Awards weekend, which we do every year. So this is a real treat, at least for me. I hope it is for you all as well, just to get to hang out with my fellow cartoonists. These are 4 of my favorite people on the planet. So this is a real treat for me. Okay, let's get to the first question, which is, which comic strips inspired you to be a cartoonist? And we can start with Patrick and then move from there, or if Patrick doesn't have an answer, we can go elsewhere.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. First, I've been thinking about Mickey Mouse the whole time. So my answer to Mickey Mouse is everybody needs a dog, even a mouse. And I think with Pluto and Goofy, you know, some dogs are more human than other dogs. Some dogs are real dogs and some dogs have a lot of human traits. So maybe that's what's going on there.
Wow, that's a great answer.
You know, Earl, the dog who inspired my strip, was based on my dog, Earl, who was a Jack Russell. And he was really human. I mean, he just was part of the family. And now I have a new dog, and she's more dog-like and less human. So maybe
Interesting.
Goofy, there is something
Okay.
there. And as far as strips, I mean, I think it's true of a lot of us our age, but Peanuts was the reason. Actually, Peanuts, you know, Snoopy was the reason I loved dogs and wanted a dog. And Charles Schultz was the reason I wanted to draw cartoons. So Peanuts is responsible very, very largely for what I do. And then later, growing up, in my teen years, I discovered Crazy Cat by George Herman. And that was a really major influence. It really showed me how far you could take cartoons.
Huh. Crazy Cat is also one of Matt Groening's favorite strips, and he cites that as one that inspired him. Maybe to do Itchy and Scratchy, I'm sure, but Greg, how about you?
Well, for me, it was Mutz. When I was a little teeny kid, Mutz, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Pat. No, same thing. You know, I bet you 90% of the cartoonists that would be asked this question would say Sparky. Charles Schultz was their inspiration for a multitude of reasons. I just always admired the simplicity of the look of it, but the depth and nuance of the writing and the characters and so forth. And I just thought, wow, anybody who can do this is some kind of a genius. And I found out that's true because I'm far from being there. But and Snoopy, of course, was always a favorite. And the expressions and the fun things. I remember I asked, talking to Sparky one time, and he said, a good comic strip should be like a full piano keyboard that you have all the notes you need to play anything that you want to play, whether it's, you know, a rag or a rock or a Rachmaninoff or anything in between. And that's so brilliant. And he did that so well. He had a full array of outlets for all his creative ideas.
Karen, how about you?
Yeah.
Well, while we're on the Peanuts track, I have to say, I think I learned to speak from Woodstock mostly, really inspirational there. I don't know, I was a little bit lucky because I was little when Luann started. So that was just a norm in my house. I just assumed most people's dads drew comic strips for a living, and that their coworkers were cartoonists. So that seemed super normal. And growing up, I don't know why we didn't, I don't remember being really gravitating towards comic books, but we had lots of comic strips in the house and comic strip collections. I've always been an animal person, so of course I was reading and enjoying anything that had an animal in it. So the Marmadukes and the Garfields and the Heathcliffs, and For Better For Worse with Farley and all of that stuff. And honestly, growing up, I didn't plan to inherit the family business. That was sort of a weird, later as an adult, aha moment. because my drive is usually towards the written word more than the visual side of things. And it took a long time to realize that those two play together to make a good comic strip. So even if my art skills aren't the primary, the storytelling, like Dad was referencing, the ability to tell stories and have those visuals to go with it is just amazing. And of course, it's really cool now because people that I hung out with when I was a little kid and just thought they were Dad's coworkers are my peers, and cartoonists are incredibly, incredibly wonderful people and creative, fun, optimistic individuals.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Wayno, how about you?
Well, when I was a kid, Pittsburgh had 2 daily papers, so I read tons of comics, all of them. And I was thinking about the ones that really kind of fascinated me. And I keep going back to T.K. Ryan's Tumbleweeds, because his drawing style was so weird. The characters kind of looked like what we now call bobbleheads, like a giant head in this little tiny body. But the writing was so, like everything was really deadpan, just, very quiet and sarcastic in an interesting way. And I loved cowboy stuff. So it was, and it was something that when I looked at the weird character design, I kind of thought maybe I'd be able to draw that good, in my childhood brain. Then when I got a little older and was buying reprint books, I discovered Virgil Parch and went insane with just loving his single panel work. And I can still see his influence in some of the things I do.
I think for me, I remember Tumbleweeds. It was that was one of my favorites as well. Even though I didn't become a comic strip artist, I went into different areas of cartooning. I was like Patrick and Greg because I loved Peanuts. And it's kind of amazing I didn't become a strip artist because I had a scrapbook that I would clip. That was really the only strip that I would clip out was Peanuts, and had all the paperback books and all that. So yeah, that was my top one. What do you think are, since we're discussing animals in comics, what do you think are the top animal oriented, sort of animal centric strips of all time?
It's got to be Crazy Cat.
Crazy Cat.
Mm-hmm.
I think Peanuts sort of became an animal strip. If you look at the early ones, Snoopy's there as Charlie Brown's dog, but it's really more about the kids. And it seems like at some point, maybe in the 60s, Snoopy sort of became the Fonzie of Peanuts. Where
Yes.
I really like the really early Peanuts where Snoopy was still kind of a dog.
Yeah.
Down on all fours. He got up on
Yeah.
his hind legs and started walking around at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I also
Fancy.
love the later Snoopy, but that early Snoopy was, just like the neighborhood dog, which had a nice feeling to it.
Yeah, I agree.
And Crazy Cat's a great animal strip, but boy, they do not like it. There's not too many references really to them being a dog, a cat, and a mouse. Napoleon, I don't know if you know that strip, but that strip where the dog pretty much stayed a dog.
I know that.
You know that? It's a pretty obscure strip, but it was a big dog, and he stayed dog-like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was pre-Marmaduke.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even Marmaduke, though, even though it's, the dog is the title character and his antics, there's a difference between like early Snoopy as a dog and Snoopy who became a full-blown character with thoughts and adventures. So Marmaduke has stayed a dog. We don't go into a Marmaduke mindset in comparison to like Patrick, your characters, they're not just dog and cat. They have voice, they have their own adventures and attitudes, so to speak, beyond just animalness.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first started out, I was purposely trying to keep them more domesticated. But when you do something for 25 years, it changes and you don't even know it's changing.
That actually feeds into another question that I had, which is I was thinking about Mutts and Luann and Bizarro, and all of those strips have animals, but they all approach animals from a different way, from a different, well, they just have a different approach to how animals are dealt with. So I'm wondering, can you each sort of talk about your approach to animals in your strips? And was there ever a time that you thought about doing it differently than the way you do it now? And Patrick sort of touched on that. But like when you first started thinking about putting animals in your strips, like Wayno, for instance, the animals in your strips are really portrayed sort of as human, more anthropomorphic, but they have animal traits, and that's where the humor really comes from. Is
Right.
they behave like we observe animals behaving.
Right, and it's also a way of kind of commenting on human behavior as well. But they're just so, I mean, especially our dogs and cats, they're something that everyone can relate to. And but I like to use all sorts of animals, and I kind of end up doing a lot of homework to try to draw them accurately. So when I do dogs and cats, domestic dogs and cats, they're sort of like half, humanized, but I do a lot of things with like snails and, hyenas and other animals like that. And for me, I find it funnier when it's a pretty straight ahead, realistic looking, lobster speaking, rather than like a wacky cartoonified lobster. But they're just fun to draw.
This is kind of a side question, and we'll get back to the other question, but do you find that animals are easier to draw? I mean, I think a famous cartoonist once said that he draws animals rather than humans because they're easier to draw.
Yeah.
Easier to draw paws than hands.
Right. Hands.
They don't use phones. I can't draw a lobster. So.
Well, I kind of painted myself into a corner recently because I was doing this lobster gag where they were standing up, and like I have no idea what a lobster looks like from underneath, and so it was like half research and half faking it.
Thank God for Google.
Right.
So Greg, your strip is more real life in the way it approaches animals, right? It's
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Luann has a little dog named Puddles, and he came into the strip fairly early on as a gift from a relative. And my idea was to just kind of have him as a real animal. He would never think or speak. He wouldn't be Garfield. He wouldn't be Snoopy. And he would kind of provide a reactionary image to things that Luann was saying and doing in her bedroom with her diary and so forth. So in that sense, I suppose he was a little anthropomorphic because he would make expressions and so forth. And then at one point, a few years back, inspired by the Schultzes and their interest in canine companions, I did a storyline where Luann's best friend Bernice gets a canine companion's dog to raise, and that dog and Puddles naturally get together. And for a brief period, I actually had Puddles speaking in thought balloons to this other dog. But other than that, he's remained kind of a go-to for, easy gags, funny Sunday, easy on the eye kind of stuff. And again, there's a reactionary element to Luann's traumas and dramas.
That's interesting because you whether consciously or unconsciously, you sort of set up rules for your strip in terms of how characters behave or how animals behave. but then at some point you decide to break the rules. So I mean, is that like a conscious thing where you actually sit down when you're creating the strip and you decide it's going to be a certain way and characters will do a certain thing and they won't do other things? Or is it more organic?
Well, it's both. In the case of Puddles, having him speak in balloons, that was not a well thought out idea on my part, because when I look back at those strips now, they just stick out like a sore thumb in the rest of the strip. They don't fit in the world. They're just wrong. So if I had to do again, I wouldn't do it that way. I mean, the Canine Companion story was terrific in every other way. That particular element, though, with the two dogs and Puddles thinking, no, that was a bad choice. I needed a good editor, Bill. Where were you?
I just want to add on there about the Canine Companions, if anyone's not aware of that organization, because it's kind of a neat, since many of us were talking about Peanuts at the beginning. So it's Canine Companions for Independence, and it's an organization that raises dogs to assist folks with disabilities. And that was neat because it was through the Schultzes. They had developed an interest, and there's one of their headquarters is located near here in San Diego. So being able to portray one of our characters being a puppy raiser, and the fun contrast and the appeal, I think, with those two characters of Puddles and this dog Royce, it would be hard. I don't know how you would tell the story without being able to go into these dogs' heads, because Puddles was sort of the like, I live a cool life and I'm just lazy, and people, you know, the humans in the world are here to serve me, and I nap in the sun and it's glorious. And then Royce is training to be the service dog. So he's very like, I have a duty and I'm here to perform and to learn and to do good in the world. And Puddles is like, geez, I thought my life was good, but now I feel sort of pointless. So it's a fun storyline, but it does stick out as far as continuity in the strip, because I think there's one other storyline with Puddles and he has like a Christmas adventure, but overall, no, he's expressive. He seems to understand language because he responds accordingly, but we don't see into his mind otherwise.
I think the next time I have an idea like that, I'm going to send it to you, Patrick.
Perfect.
For editing?
No, you'll buy it for thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Patrick, what is your approach to, obviously your strip is more, I mean, there are humans in the strip, but it's really, I think, more about the animals. So what is your approach to how animals are portrayed? Is it more sort of based on Snoopy, where they're real animals to humans, but we get to see as the audience, we get to know what they're thinking and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, like most comic strips, it evolves over the years, and it is organic. You don't really plan it. It just kind of evolves. But when I started, I really wanted them to be as cat and dog-like as possible. I didn't want them to be, humans in animals' clothes, playing on computers. I mean, most cartoon animals are pretty much just humans, and they just happen to be a dog or a cat. So I really, I think people know that, any cat and dog owner knows their cat and dog has so much personality or funny being a cat and dog. So I was really, in the beginning, trying to have their adventures be cat and dog adventures. And also when they were with the humans, they were pretty much cat and dog like. And when they were alone is when they kind of talked to each other and would discuss living in this world. And then as the years went by, my purpose, I was trying to see the world through my dog's eyes and my cat's eyes. And, as I developed it, I started thinking about all the dogs and cats that were in shelters and thought I should tell those stories. And then that evolved to even thinking about other animals, tigers and elephants in Africa and some of their stories. So it was an opportunity to give a voice to the voiceless. So like Greg said before, comic strips, good comic strips are like a piano where you could cover a lot of different topics. And, that it doesn't always have to be just a gag. I think the good strips like Crazy Cat and Snoopy and Popeye, covered a lot of different topics.
Mm-hmm. So Karen sort of opened the door to talking about organization. So I'd like to see if any of the rest of you have organizations that you're involved in that help animals, or Patrick, I know you do. So do you want to take a moment to plug that?
Well, we should probably plug the Helen Woodward Animal Center, who's running this. No, I've been blessed. When I started Shelter Stories, actually it was the Humane Society of the United States. I think Mutz was like 2 years old, and I was doing, in my sketchbooks, I was doing stories about shelter animals, but I wasn't sure how to put it in with Earl and Mooch. And then the Humane Society wrote me a letter and said that that November, the first week in November, is National Animal Shelter Appreciation Week. So I thought that was a good opportunity to do a week of shelter stories. So I started doing that twice a year. And because of that, I've worked and had the pleasure to meet a lot of shelter workers, and they're saints on earth. All the shelter workers are living saints. All the time and work they do and all the love. So I've worked with a lot of groups, and particularly Humane Society of the United States. I was actually asked to be on their board, and I was on their board for 10 years. And the Fund for Animals, which is part of the Humane Society, and I'm still on their board. But I highly praise and recommend to, I think anyone doing that work, shelter work, farm sanctuary work, those are the saints, and we all should support them.
Amen. I'll just tell a little story as an aside. My wife and I have 2 dogs and 2 cats. I think for most of our married life, we were cat people. So we didn't have dogs, we just had cats. And she was at a mall buying a present for a friend. And she walked by a place that used to be a pet store. It was like a puppy mill pet store. And there was a sign in the window, and it said, "Adoption is the best policy," or something like that. And she thought, that's weird. Why would a pet store have that in the window? So she thought, I got to check this out. So she went in, and it turns out a rescue had taken over this same space that was a pet store. So she's talking to the woman, and looking over her shoulder, she sees this little black and white dog in a window box. And the woman that she's talking to notices that, my wife is looking over her shoulder at this dog. And she says, "Oh, that's Ruby. Do you want me to, I can get Ruby out and you can play with her over here in the area." And she says, no, that's okay. My husband and I don't really want a dog. We're cat people. We have cats. And she says, "Oh, no, it's no trouble." So she got this, she brought the dog out, and my wife instantly fell in love with her. And then she came home and she started telling me about this dog. And my reaction was, "Oh, you know how busy we are. We don't have time to walk the dog. And, cats are much easier. I love dogs, but we just don't have the energy and the time," and blah, blah, blah. So throughout the course of the weekend, she kept pestering me. "Well, just go down and take a look. Just look at the dog." So finally, it was a Sunday afternoon, and she was pestering me again. And I said, if I go down there, the chances of us coming back without a dog are like that big, because you know what a sucker I am. So of course we went down. I met Ruby, who's now Gidget. And all I could say was, "Give me the paperwork." I just fell in love with this dog, and I'm going to show you Gidget. This was Ruby. She's now an older dog. This was 10 years ago. So we rescued her. Say hi, Gidget. Hi.
Gidget's a great name. How old is Gidget now?
Gidget's, we don't really know for sure, but she's probably about 14 or 15.
That's great. My Earl, who was inspired the comic strip, lived to 19.
Wow. Great. Anyway, this was Ruby. She's now Gidget. She's got congestive heart failure. And currently now she's on about 5 different medicines, but she's doing good. She's a little camera shy. But anyway, my wife and I, from that experience, we became involved in pet rescue and shelters. That's Gidget coughing. I'm sorry, Gidget. I'll get your medicine after we're done. Okay, sorry about that. That was just kind of an aside.
Oh, that was so appropriate, Bill. That was
Thank
perfect.
you. Let me see how much time we've got. Okay, we got about 10 minutes until we're going to do some audience Q&A.
Can I talk for a second about Helen Woodard for a
yes,
minute?
go ahead.
Yeah. So they're local here in San Diego, but they're really phenomenal, really world-reaching organization. And one of the things that I admire so much about them is that they've revolutionized the messaging around animal adoption and how we're presenting the idea of animals needing to find homes and how we care for animals in that space while they're waiting to be rehomed. So we've had a chance to meet with some of the folks involved behind the scenes, and I've just continuously been impressed with not just their local efforts, but their messaging efforts to help other organizations rethink how can we care for animals and frame this as a positive opportunity rather than sort of a sad prison system that you're trying to bail these abandoned animals, but reframing it as a positive. We've got orphaned animals looking for homes, and how do we make that feel like a good part of our community rather than this sort of sketchy thing that happens. And I know my experience in going to their center compared to some other places that we've had, I was trying to add up like how many cats and dogs have gone through the Evans household. I stopped counting somewhere around like 20. But just some of the other places that I've rescued or adopted animals out of, that they're just so discouraging as a setting, and seeing a shift in the community approach to recognizing animals need homes and how to do that good work. So I'm a big supporter of their work and their messaging beyond just kind of the local impact of being a neat resource and an amazing center here in the San Diego area.
Cool.
Yeah, all the animals that we've had have all come from shelters, except a few that maybe wandered into the yard, but we've all gone and gotten them from shelters. To me, going to a shelter, it's like a combination of Christmas and Disneyland, because you never know, there's like, what gift are you going to find here? So we've got our guys. And one thing, Champ, come here, say hi, come on, okay. Come on, Champ. Here you go.
Camera
This
shy.
is Champ, and you can see he's a big guy, gentle as anything. And then we have little Charlie. So I've always been a major contributor to dog food companies.
So the next question is, and probably the last one. I'm gonna tell a short little story as a lead into this as well. I met a cartoonist once who I was introduced to him as, and it was while Futurama was in production. So I was introduced as the art director of Futurama, and he looked at me and he was, previous to this, he was very friendly, and his face suddenly got very serious and he said, "I hate Futurama." And I said, "Oh, well, it's not for everyone, but, just out of curiosity, why do you hate it?" And he said, "Well, there was this one episode where Fry, one of the main characters, discovers the fossilized remains of his dog from
I know that one, yeah.
And at the end of this episode, they try cloning the dog, and at the end of the episode, they show the dog through the seasons waiting for Fry to return. And of course, he never returned because he was cryogenically frozen and ended up, in the future. But it was a very sad ending, just extremely sad. And this guy said, after that, my wife and I were both dog lovers, and we decided we're never going to watch this show again because it just had such a tragic ending. And so the question is, do you get feedback from your fans about the characters in your strip, whether human or animal, but since we're talking about animals? And do you find that fans sort of think they exist in the real world? You know, do they get emotionally involved in the things that happen to the characters in your strip? And anybody can just jump in.
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
Well, I get a lot of pictures of cats with little pink socks, and a lot. You know, I get really nice, touching stories of people sending me pictures of a new dog or cat they adopted, and you know, sometimes they name them Mooch or Stinky or whatever, and that's always very, very, very rewarding. Just recently, I've been saying it for the last 10 years that I was going to have the Fatty Snacks Deli that the dog and cat visit once in a while. That I'm a vegan and I was planning on making it go veggie for a long time. So just this summer, I had the Fatty Snacks Deli guy go veggie. And most people were really excited by that, and we got a lot of good feedback. But a group were afraid that cats can't be vegan, so I got a lot of letters about, you know, that be careful that cat vegan. Now the thing is, that was a misunderstanding. The cat didn't go vegan. The butcher from the Fatty Snacks Deli went vegan. But,
Yeah.
So I actually posted on Facebook. We're going to explain how cats shouldn't be vegan, but dogs can be vegan. But you have to be very careful and monitor them.
That's something I didn't know. I didn't know there was a distinction between cats and dogs as far as veganism. Anybody else want to talk about your fans and how they emotionally relate to your characters? I would think Luann gets a lot of.
We get a lot. Because we have a large cast of characters and it's a lot more like a sitcom environment with ongoing, complicated, dramatic storylines, we have a lot of fans who these characters are very real to them and the stories are very real to them, and that includes Puddles. And one of my favorite examples was a strip where the characters go out into the front lawn and the dog is out there with them. And whatever else is happening in the strip is irrelevant because the commenters online that day at gocomics.com, it just blew up into this big, big heated conversation out of concern for the dog, because I don't think the front yard is fenced and the dog is not seeming to be wearing a collar and it's not on a leash and it could run away, and it's concerning. I mean, people were quoting their local like code on leash laws or if you needed to have your dog licensed. Very, very intensive analysis on the safety, legality concern for the dog being on the front lawn. And it didn't have anything to do with the actual story of the strip, but that definitely captured our readers' imagination for the day. What could happen, and oh no, I hope they're safe, and the dog gets back into the house. And it's really endearing, actually. Like sometimes you worry about people who are that concerned for a fictional animal, but then I think there's some hope in that if we can have that much concern for a fictional animal, then that's a sign we can have equally relevant concern for you know, real things and real concerns in life. So yes, they definitely they care very deeply and have a lot of thoughts about.
So here we have kind of a weak storyline with our characters. Send Puddles wandering out the door.
What about that?
Or go to, yeah, Puddles can always save the day, right?
Yeah.
Wayno, how about for you? Because you have a different kind of approach as a single panel.
Right.
artist.
We have no continuing characters, so I can, you know, do any dog or any cat at any time. But we do get a lot of feedback, and sometimes I've found since I joined and started doing the Daily Bizarros that we have very literate and smart readers who will let me know when I get something wrong, but they let me know when I get it right too. So, you know, but it's a great experience that we can, you know, with our technology, we can have one-on-one conversations with people. And I'm learning that when somebody writes, if they're upset about something, that for the most part, they want to be heard. And if you respond in kind, that you hear their concern and you understand it, and you know, this is what is behind it, they turn into more loyal readers. You know, I'm sure that you've all experienced that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Do you get mail as well for your some of the other cartoons that you do outside of Bizarro?
Oh, sometimes it's less and less because I do nothing else anymore. You know, I went from you know, all of a sudden 3 years ago I went from doing what I felt like, and I had an online strip that I did like two or 3 days per week, but if I didn't do them it was okay, and now I have 6 deadlines every week, so that's my job. That's all I do.
How much, this is, we got about a minute and a half. How much of, when animals are involved in your strips, how much is based on your own pets? I mean, do you draw inspiration from things that they do or things that happen, incidents?
Yeah, for me, constantly, the Earl was based on my dog Earl, so kind of the way he looked and the way he acted, and I would always think, what is he thinking? And I grew up with cats, and I had cats my whole life, so yeah, they're a big influence on my strip.
Hmm.
And you know, as a cartoonist, I'm sure everyone, the cat and dog are pretty much in my studio all day, so I'm always looking at them.
Yeah. That's something that we kind of talked about before we went live, is how most people through the pandemic are stuck at home. And I hear a lot of people talking about, oh, I get to spend more time with my animals, or my animals are getting sick of me because, you know, I'm constantly taking them for a walk so I can get out of the house. But I think for most of us, it's kind of business as usual, right?
Mhm.
And especially as far as relating to our pets. I mean, we've always got our pets around. So it's kind of
Right.
nice.
I feel like dogs have really made out. I walk my dog all the time, and in the past, I would rarely see another dog walker. Now, everybody's out walking. I think the dogs have made out the last 3 months. The other day, I saw a whole family of like 7 walking their dog. I've never seen that before.
We're
Yeah, I
seeing
don't think
a lot of families on our street have adopted dogs since the pandemic started. We've got like I think 3 really cool new dogs on our street that we get to
wow.
see all the time.
Well, I see Jessica has popped back in. Are we ready for Q&A?
I've been enjoying this so much. I've decided I need to have comics as friends now because I've been chuckling and enjoying this so much. Thank you guys so much for being here. And I do have some viewer questions. I've got a question that I want to direct to each one of you. And I want to start with Bill because you've been doing such a beautiful job leading the panel, and we have a question for you.
Oh, thank
Which
you.
is, do you have a favorite comic or even a specific character that you've worked on that was your kind of your favorite one to work on?
Oh, okay. But not necessarily an animal.
It could be whatever you want. I think that they're very curious about what you've liked working
Oh,
on.
okay. I think my favorite character is Batman. But I haven't really done much work on Batman. I've done a few minor things, but because I grew up as a frustrated superhero artist and then found out I couldn't really draw superheroes that well, but I could draw cartoon superheroes. My favorite is Radioactive Man from The Simpsons. That's of the things that I've done.
Right.
And Radioactive Man, for people who don't know, he's basically a really ripped version of Homer Simpson, who's kind of right wing. So in the comic book, we sort of played with his political leanings a little bit, had some fun with that.
Great answer.
Fun.
All right, Patrick. Question for you. Was Mutz your first comic strip? And if not, what other characters did you create prior to Mutz?
Well, before Mutz, I was a magazine illustrator, and but I really wanted to be a comic strip artist, so I kind of had a cast of, and it was a version of Ozzy and Earl before they had the name Ozzy and Earl. So they were, and whenever I could, I would also do comic strips for illustrations rather than single, panel illustrations. And early on in college, I had a strip in a rock and roll newspaper in New Jersey called The Shoopies. and it was just a New Jersey family. And the mother and father were kind of the start of Frank and Millie and Mutts. And when I first started illustrating, I actually did a comic strip for Parents Magazine called Bad Baby. And it was about a crazy little baby. So those were the things before Mutts. But as far as a daily newspaper comic strip, that was my first try, and I got lucky. And King Features picked up Mutts.
Very cool. Well, my husband's from New Jersey, so I'm very curious about your business. Okay, this question is for Wayno. It's from a quote unquote longtime big fan. And they say, can you comment on why animals are smarter than people in your comics?
That's the way it is in the world, I think. That's real life. I think animals are more consistent than people. In general, I have kind of a cynical view, which is really kind of odd because I'm just looking around at everyone on this call, and these are all like people I love and that are great people. But you know, I mean, it's hard to compete with an animal. That's a great question.
I agree with that. Okay, this one is for Karen. Karen, in what ways did animals play a special part in your childhood? Did you have a dog like Puddles?
Oh goodness. Okay, well, you're gonna hear my cat, by the way. So she has a knack. I'm sure many people who have cats with Zoom know. As soon as you get on, they're like, "I'll go stand 6 feet away and complain." Let me see if I can grab her here. So yeah, this is Snoogans, by the way, doing the usual cat on camera avoidance thing. I've long loved animals. So I know the first real pet we had as a family was, I was around 4 or 5, and we got a Cocker Spaniel puppy named Muffy. And my remembrance is that this was a wonderful, living baby doll that I could try to cuddle and snuggle. I think the parents' perspective was raising young children and a puppy was a lot to handle. And we ended up, it was just a struggle. Like, this dog just didn't mesh well with the family dynamic, and trying to potty train was a big ordeal, which I think plays into why Puddles is called Puddles. So the decision was made to rehome Muffy. This just wasn't working out. And it was one of these fascinating things because the family that adopted her never had a single problem. Like, this dog was just the perfect fit. They were like, oh, she's perfectly housebroken, which had been a constant trauma. Years later, we were having a garage sale, and this little white dog showed up and was super friendly and awesome, but we knew it wasn't ours, so we tried to figure out. It turned out it belonged to a neighbor, and we kind of shooed it back to the neighbor. Just this dog kept coming back to our house and was so wonderful and smart and engaging. And like Patrick's comment about how some are so human, this was one of those dogs you just swear if they could vocalize it, they'd speak to you. And so we finally spoke to this neighbor, your dog keeps showing up. And he said, oh, that dog's horrible. And she digs and chews and bites, and she's not housebroken. And we're like, what dog are you talking about? And he said, you want her, you can have her. And she was the most amazing dog, never had an issue. So she was, I think, plays into that Puddles sensibility of really responding and understanding. She was that dog that you could grasp. But yes, lots of dogs and cats. I've always been a horse person though, so I have a horse now, and I love cats and dogs, but horses are my obsession. So there you go.
You love animals overall.
All of them, yes.
And then Greg, how old was Karen when you started drawing Luann, and how did her growth impact the direction of your comic strip?
Karen, you were what, 6? Is that right?
This many.
This
many. Yeah, I was 6 when the strip actually launched. It was right before my my 6th birthday.
Yeah.
And then as she grew older,
my original idea? Yeah, I was doing a strip about a little 6-year-old, a saucy little 6-year-old, and I should have given her an imaginary tiger, and I would have been a zillionaire. But instead, I aged her to my character to 13, which seemed a lot more, fruitful, with juicy stuff to do. And then, so I just making stuff up until Karen caught up and she became a teenager. And then there was an abundance of material that I could embarrass her with. And although I tried not to do that. So yeah, there was a lot that Karen brought to the strip without even knowing it.
Fascinating. Well, I do want to tell you all, one of the things at Helen Woodward Animal Center, of course, our whole goal, and I want to thank everybody who said so many nice things about Helen Woodward. We obviously we love animals and we believe that they're family, and the work that you guys do and the joy that you bring and the personalities that you bring to animals, I think it is an education to people when they open up the paper or look at one of your comics. It's always reminding people that these animals have feelings and thoughts, and so you're doing such a beautiful service to animals and specifically to animal welfare. So I want to thank you very much for that, for all of you. And I did want to say, Patrick, I actually have two dogs, and one is a dog and one is a Dooman, which is a dog human. So I very much understand what you mean. I do have a dog human. We do a Dooman spooning sometimes when we, but I just wanted to give you all the last words of this panel. So I thought we could kind of go down and whatever you'd like to say about art, about rescue, about animals, just some final words. I know everybody admires you all so much and would love to hear from each of you. So if we could start with Bill.
I actually have a story. I have a lot of stories.
I love that.
But this is, I mentioned that my wife and I got involved with a dog rescue. And one year at PAWmicon, San Diego, I was the moderator of the Futurama panel. So it was Matt Groening and all the writers. And this particular year, we had almost the entire voice cast on stage. So the year before this, they had asked me to do this piece of artwork. And they did like a mock drawing competition between Matt Groening and one of the Futurama show directors on stage. And so it's like, how many characters can you draw in 2 minutes? And they both had easels set up. And I had done this prop piece of art that was this elaborate Futurama drawing. And they put it on Matt's easel at the last minute. And it had all these characters. So he won. The audience saw that he cheated. And so they booed him, and it was really fun. It was really great. So they decided to do it the next year, but they said, we want you to do, and they gave the artwork to one of the audience members as a reward for a question. So we did a Q&A. So they actually gave the original art to this audience member. So they asked me to do it again, but even bigger and more elaborate, big giant piece of foam core. And the director, David X. Cohen, was so appreciative when I gave him the artwork. And because he was so appreciative, I sort of took the opportunity to say, would you mind this year if we didn't give this to an audience member? I'd like to give it to a charity, like to donate it, raise some money. And he said, yeah, we love it. You can do whatever you want with it. So, because the whole voice cast was there, I got everybody to sign it after the panel was done. So it's this big, giant, double sheet of foam core, and it's signed by the entire cast. It's like an amazing zombie apocalypse scene. And I put it on eBay, and at the time, the animal shelter that my wife and I worked with had this medical bill, because there was a mother dog who was delivering puppies, and they had complications, and they didn't have the money to pay the hospital bill. So we, right around the same time, we put this thing on eBay. It raised over $6,000.
Wow.
And we were able to save the mother and save all the puppies. And my wife and I fostered the litter, and we kept one of the puppies, whose name is Ripley. And we had the tragedy for the first time of having to, I don't know how foster people do it, because we had to adopt out the other 3. And that was, there was a lot of tears, let me tell you.
But you are a foster failure, at least for one of them, which we love.
Yes,
So,
we
good for you.
foster fails, yes.
It's a great
So
story.
to me, that was like the perfect marriage of what I do as a cartoonist and animals, which I love, and making it was a win-win-win.
Well, that's beautiful. I love that story. Bless you. Thank you. What about you, Patrick? Last words?
Well, first, I'd like to thank the Helen Woodward Animal Center for having this and promoting sheltering and animal kindness. And boy, it was great to be with Bill, Wayno, Greg, and Karen. It's as we said before, cartoonists are just such great people, and I'm blessed. I get to be with cartoonists and animal people, and you can't get two of the nicest group of people on the planet. And I probably don't have to say it to this group, but I would just say if you're thinking about getting a dog or a cat, definitely adopt. And it's a good time to foster. And also, it's a good time to expand your compassion and empathy for all animals.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I appreciate that, Patrick. How about you, Greg?
Well, it's interesting. I think that what all of us do as cartoonists is very similar to what our pets do for us. And that is to provide these little tidbits, little moments of pleasure and happiness, maybe a smile each day. So keep it up, you guys. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you, Greg. How about you, Wayno?
Well, I'd like to echo Patrick and thank Helen Woodward Center for having us here, because shelters and adoption, that's the way to go. And my wife and I have had many cats in our adult lives, and they've all been great, but sometimes you meet a once in a lifetime pet. And we went to a shelter when one of our cats had passed away, and there was a situation where they rescued like 100 cats from a hoarder situation, an adult cat that was in really bad shape. He had this horrible scratchy voice, and he turned into like he just loved people, no matter what people did to him. In his experience, when anyone came to our house, Hoagie would come to greet them. And he's not with us anymore, but I wear his rabies tag and his adoption tag to remind me to think about him and how he would react to people. So don't adult animals are as great as any puppy or kitten.
Beautiful, and I think that they really do appreciate. I always get the sense that adult animals, when they're adopted, really do appreciate those that adopt.
They know what's going on.
Thank you so much. And Karen, final words?
Well, that's a hard lineup to follow. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to all the folks who were tuning in and viewing. And I just have to tell you, my cat's all curled up here, very content and happy. And I agree. I think it's a privilege and a blessing to do work that brings a little bit of joy and compassion out to the world, and being able to support others who are, love animals and want to support the animals is so important. And I think that's a great new slogan, Wayno, kind of like, what would Hoagie do? I love it. I love it. Like, no matter what comes our way, we can still be open-hearted and warm towards, the people and animals around us. So that's a great thought to keep in mind.
I love that.
You're looking for my t-shirt in the mail.
Yeah. What would Hoagie do?
Well, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, from all of us at Helen Woodward Animal Center, all of our orphan animals. We love you guys so much. This will be available for those who missed it today. So this will still be available for people to watch. And we are so grateful. So thank you very much. And goodbye, you guys.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Hope to see you soon.